Alo ai tu verira rota ua tanile hua. Alo ai tu verira rota ua tanile hua. Kawanani hele hua lalo hilo handakai. Wanani hele hua lalo hilo handakai. Autu hui pohi Hawaii de dai. Autu ora. Autu hui pohi Hawaii de dai. Autu ora. Auna aue rai de dai. Auna enna. Auna aue rai de dai. Auna enna. Adui ame. Aduia amete aulana alaopuna haina maita puana roda ua atanirehua haina maita puana roda ua atanirehua haya haya welcome. Okay. We want to say thank you for coming. A little commercial. Why we're here in a little intimate group and not in a big space. This is part of the 2019 Woka series. Yomako Kalila's brainchild sent me an email and says, that's a good idea. This should be we can do it. We can do it better. So, Punaya, our competition at the time. In any case, we realized that in our social, our Hula circle, in our Hula guild, we have a lot of people that not just know how to dance Hula, but they can actually articulate Hula in ways that can extend beyond how we live and how we make decisions and create the quality of our well-being. So I invited Antihokulani here, Hope from Maui, and again, this is Hamula Chinese, my and they will share with us a particular focus about 20 years, the 1970s and 1980s. And it was the intent of the Mokaleo de Ruakia is the first issue. First issue, yeah. On record. First, and the Hiapo. So, Mahalo, I don't see much in you. Mama will bring you to Hilo. Yeah, well, the other items for all you Mahalo. And the Mokalele series, the word Mokalele is a name actually that belongs to a forested area a little bit above the University of Hawaii at Hilo's campus. And some people say the borders are here, and some people say the borders are there. But in the world of myth, we just point, and that's where it is. Mokaulele means the flying hook. We say Mokau, also known as Makau. So Mokaulele is the flying hook, and it's from Maui. Maui, who had this idea to attach the island of Maui to the island of Hawaii to build, two island resource base, and this idea nearly worked. The deal was, all these brothers pulling the canoe could not look back no matter what they heard. According to one version, the best version, was under the strain of pulling the island. One of them went Pukiku. And when the attention to break, and in that short break of attention, the island is reverted back. The only piece of Maui that is left is in our area is Mokuoa. So where we hold ceremonies, interestingly, part of Maui. The word Maui means to be in a condition of always asking questions, to be Maui, to always to inquire of your world. So Mokaulele is really founded on not just wanting to learn old hula, but why we learn old hula. How can the hula benefit us? It allows us to ask questions that sometimes we're not allowed to ask in the halal system. It allows us to come with certain rules and norms. But here at the university, and Hula, they have it all right there and right here, we can ask questions. And come inside, aloha. We can ask questions, and you know why we want to ask questions? Because the day will come and we might want to walk away from our tradition if we don't have answers for them. If the answers they need for the well-being of their life is anchored in somebody else's culture, that's where they're going to go. We all want meaning. You can learn one dance and it comes with a lot of meaning, or you can learn 1,000 dances and no meaning, and the chances are the dance with meaning is going to live. Okay? So we're here because we want to investigate our tradition, our Hula. It's one of our strongest foundations. So why not really look at Hula with inquisitive eyes, ask particular kinds of questions, because now the university we're going through an indigenizing transformation. We're wanting to not just study Hawaiian, but we want to incorporate the values and the practices within the servicing units of the university. All too often the university just blocks itself right in any indigenous community, and the people that are least likely to succeed are the very indigenous communities those universities are in. So we have to ask the question why that is. We all knew the answer. It wasn't really designed for people like us. But we need education. Therefore, the only choice we have is to redesign the university system for people like us, people of diversity, people of indigenous origins, who refuse to leave their culture outside the university system, but they need to see their culture inside to succeed. So, we're here because we want to look at Hula because it's going to help us understand how it is that we can advance our indigenous outcomes within the university system, not just for Hawaii, but perhaps for the world, people that are in similar situations like ours. And so, Mokaulele is that there is a little kind of at a point. So often enough, when you're a Hula student, you don't hear it, but when you uniki, and I think Moka was at our uniki session, she was like our God, she's like our God. Okay? She gave us a speech to step through this veil, but the speech meant that you cannot handle stay there. But if you can handle step through, which meant you have to be committed. And so this is part of our commitment to forwarding Hula, not just as a choreographical dance form, but really as a door to understanding who we are and where we want to go with this. But we want to, there is this little thing that happens, and I never heard it when I was a student, I heard it when I became a teacher, and there is this really conservatist approach to how Hula gets transferred. And sometimes you hear that, in every culture you have the real liberal and the real conservative. But sometimes the conservative, you hear that, and then you make you question, is it true? Is it so that you shouldn't be teaching Hula to non-families? Is it true that you shouldn't be teaching Hula to non-Hawaiians? Is it true that you should only be teaching Hula with this, or you should never teach Hula in front of a kuau? So we hear all of these kinds of opinions, and they're truths. They belong to these people. The Hula that have those kinds of, whether liberal or conservative viewpoints, they're reared in that. It's their truth. And so this kind of discussion is not to disarm their truth. This is to help us create what is our truth based on authentic experience. There was a great phenomenon that was happening in the 1970s and 80s, and that's when a lot of what we now know as the Hula masters came together and decided to expand or to actually build some flexibility in how they taught Hula, and to whom they taught Hula, and under what conditions they taught Hula. And I think the whole point of this is we want to understand from true experience, not necessarily from research. Sometimes when you research, then you grab a few people's opinions and then it somehow forms a biblical truth that may not align with ours. So it's good to have true stories, true experiences help us decide, that kind of inform how we think. Many of you in this room are Hula people. Some of you are Uniki, some of you are coming up for Uniki. So more important, very timely that Moka is here to help us. This is the last in a series. I think we had of 9. And it went by quite quick. I'm not sure if this is going to happen again. But I want to say mahalo. You guys were the first. They were the first I contacted. And this happened, the scheduling was, this was a weekend that they were open, so mahalo. We want to begin with a lay. Kelea mai lauka, kelea mai lauka, hula ike tai oka malama oni hau amari wapare kai numaila hala ona we kai no we This is our last moment for the season. And see, let's begin with who you, what you, and why you.
Oh, how do I start? I'm Hokulani. When thinking about Hula, I come from matrilineal line of Hula. My tutu, my grandmother, was Hula on Maui. She had, she had 7 daughters and 8 sons. Of her 7 daughters, 3 became Hula. My Auntie May Lowenstein, my Auntie Kahili Cummings, and my mother Leonor Woodside. And then from my grandmother's grandchildren, there is me and my sister, Eulalia Woodside. And the great-grandchildren are my cousin, Melia Lowenstein Carter, and my son, Ronald Woodside. So, we hope to continue this as much as we can. When people ask me, when did you start Hula? My answer is always the same. I don't know. It always has been. My mother has pictures of me maybe about 3 or 4 years old in the old regalia, looking like I'm dancing, so it must have happened around there. But the memory of beginning, I never thought about it, because it always has been. I had the great fortune of first starting to learn Hula in the household of my grandmother and my auntie Kahili Cummings on Maui. I was raised by my maternal grandparents on Maui, so I had the great fortune to grow up in a household that did Hula. And I often call that my informal learning, not because it was any kind of less learning, but because the informality was you did Hula whenever your auntie said. 9 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock at night, and she says, stand up, get up, that's when you do it. It wasn't Tuesdays at 4 o'clock. It was whenever she said. So I had the fortune for Hula, the fortune to be raised in a Hula household. My mother, and so I was raised from baby time in my maternal grandparents. And then when I was old enough to go to school, I went back to my parents in Honolulu, and I went to Kamehameha from kindergarten. So I'm one of those Kamehameha grads. So lifer. But in the household of my mother, and then my mother and my father divorced when I was 6. In the household of my mother, hula was always an important part of our life all the time. During the day, Monday through Friday, she worked as a secretary, but at night, on the weekend, she danced hula under Sunny Chin's grandmother, Auntie Ina Guerrero, and then was one of those during that 50s and 60s, the infamous Waikiki hula dancer. That was my mother and my auntie. So holidays, vacation, I was back on Maui. School, I was in Honolulu. So hula was always around. I never thought of it as something different or odd, or it was what happened all the time. So it was just a way of how life was. That being said, when I didn't really, and again, informal learning in the household of my mother, same thing. 4 o'clock Saturday, 2 o'clock Tuesday, whenever she said stand up. I don't count my formal learning really until I had the great fortune at about age 18 to say yes to my mother when she came home from one of her meetings at the Civic Club in Waimanalo, and she said, "Hey, they're going to teach hula in Waimanalo School. You want to go?" And I go, "Yeah, okay." You know, I didn't know who, I didn't know why. Oh, yeah, okay. And so I had the great fortune when I arrived at Blanchfield School, there was Wakale Kamau. So I said, "Yeah, okay." And so at the end of 3 months, I was the only one left in the class. So then she moved me, as well as the others that remained after going into the communities, up to her classes in Hula. And I had the great fortune of studying with her for 6 years. During that time, and I was single, so you know, I could go when we single and we go hula all the time. Right? We go hula all the time. Yeah, class might be, but you go every class, go, you know, you help. So that was me. We go hula all the time. Hard work, go hula. And with Wakale, she gave me my undying love for people. Because during those 6 years, that's all we did was study. I learned like maybe 2 awana, because we had to do it at some presentation show or something, so we never did it again. So for 6 years, it was only hula kaiko 2-3 times a week, 3-4 hours at a time. You know, when you look in the book Unwritten Literature, through her I learned at least one dance of every hula style that is mentioned in that book, except the animal dances. So I had the great fortune of being able to study with her until I decided to move back to Maui in 1976. And then the halal began after that. Because nobody in Maui wanted me to take me on as a student.
How come?
Well, you know, of course, I'm going home, so I'm going back to Maui, so I tell my mother, "Mom, who should I do?" You ask my mother, "Who should you dance hula with?" So she said, "Oh, so the grand dame of hula on Maui at that time was Emma Sharp." So, go see Auntie Emma. Okay, so I go, wait till class call, and I introduce myself, and she tells me like this, "Tell me what you know." And so I tell some of the stuff I know, and then she goes, "I have nothing more to teach you." And I went, you know, Auntie, I'll just stay in the back row. Right? I'll just stay in the back row. I won't ask questions. I don't care. I come with the babies. I don't care. I want to dance Hula. She said no. Go home. Mom! She said no. Okay, then you go see this other friend of ours, Johnny Mokoala, who is Manaleni English's granduncle. You go call up Johnny and you tell him you want to go Hula. Okay, did the same thing. He tells me, I'm going to stop teaching. I'm not going to teach anymore. So I went, you can call me up Tuesday 4 o'clock, Saturday 8 o'clock. I'll come right down. No. Okay. Mom! He said no. So she goes, okay, wait. Hang up the phone. A little while she calls me back. She said, I'm coming to Maui, pick me up. Okay. She called me up, get in the car, take me to your auntie, which is the auntie that I learned from my auntie. Take me to your auntie's house. Okay. Take her, okay, bye. That means get lost. You know? So then, no cell phones then, so I just wait and then come back later. And then, she tells me, your auntie and I have decided it's time for you to start. And I was, no, I said, Mom, I'm not ready. She goes, this is what your tutor would have wanted. No, it's time. We will help you. So how can I tell my two teachers no? Yeah, I tried. Nope. Okay. So thus came the learning from them and with them and through them for becoming Hula. I will always say that Tuakale taught me how to teach. I was teaching for her by the time I was 20. In these workshops, we would talk about classes she wanted to begin in some of the communities, and you go and you teach. And so I was teaching for her from when I was about 20. So I will always say she taught me how to teach, but my mother taught me how to be a Hula, which is an entirely different thing. And so 43 years later, here we are. Is that enough?
That's great. It's an interesting theme because Mrs. Emma Sharp, too, was denied 3 times. Something about Maui. She had to go to 3 people and some more families. Yeah, so it's the persistence. So that's something. That's a tag there. Because the no meant try again.
No meant try again.
Hula, please share with us your...
Yeah, it's fun because I remember when we first at the Hula, first one, and we were at the Kamehameha Day.
Oh gosh, yeah, down at the
bandstand.
Bandstand.
Yeah, this is the 11-year-old bandstand.
That's when I had more guts than brains. I started the Halal 76. Went to Kamehameha competition 77, 78, and Mary Monarch in 79. I have more guts than brains. Yeah, I have a bunch of projects.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Because for Maui, we knew that, I mean, the party family had kind of wrapped up over there, but over the years, it's really nice to see the progression or the growth of other it's kind of so my name's Kamuala Chan. I'm one of 11 children. I grew up in Mo'iliili, Mandarin, Ho'opahu. It's like when my father first moved to Mo'iliili, It was a dirt, University Avenue was a dirt road, and now the city grew up all around us. My grandmother lived like right kind of kitty corner behind us. When they talked about those days back in what we were, you could actually see Diamond Head because there were no condominiums at all. And my grandma would go across the street to chicken cake coops. She would get the chicken prepared for dinner, and this was what we really back in those days. And now when you look at what we can't imagine if something like that happened like that. But that's the environment that I grew up in, where we were transitioning not just as a client, but we were transitioning from this kind of rural country. Where when we grew up, the house was never locked. Everybody, that was my father's philosophy. If anybody wanted to come in, they needed a place to stay, they needed some food, they could just help themselves. That was his philosophy. So, and it was safe for us kids back then. This was the neighborhood. Now, it's changed. But this is the environment that I grew up in, and as we transitioned, as I got older, and we saw the city kind of grow up around us, there's a lot of things that affected, I think, the way we perceive our environment and the control or the we have or don't have around our environment. Hula, for me growing up, was something the girls did. My sister did, my female cousins did, my aunties did when they were young. But it wasn't something any of the guys did. Even though Hula was part of the family, not my immediate family, but within the family, there's a couple of Hulu in Honolulu on my father's side who have been teaching, who taught me for many, many years. And one of them, she's probably, I don't know if she has like the longest active halal school, but her name is Hula Halal, and her sister, Leilani Halal, both taught Hula for many, many, many years. That's their father, and my grandmother were brothers and sisters. On my mother's side, we had a distant cousin who, after I moved up to Hula, I got to meet her. I knew of her, but I got to meet her after I was a little older. Her name was Kuchikulas, and she was a comic Hula and stuff. But she had this kind of serious side to her that we taught. It was kind of an interesting perspective. So that's my mother's side of the family, and along with on my father's side. But like I said, growing up, Hula was there, but it was a lot of the females were doing it, not the ones coming. And when I went to Kamehameha schools, I was interested in dancing because I was in concert league, and at that time, Auntie Manola Beaver was the Hulu there, and she would teach us, and so she would help out with the whole EK, and so she was kind of like one of the first ones we went from. But then my classmate, Kalani Kahala, ran halal for the borders. Kalani was from Kahanapui, and so he was a border also. He got the border, and so I think I was the only day student, or one of the 2 day students. Kalani and Kala was the other one. We danced our senior year for the whole year, and I loved it because I don't know, something in me just wanted to dance. In my senior year, I was enjoying the concert league. I was fortunate to be chosen for concert league. And if you don't come back then, okay, way back then, we're talking 74, 75. This is when they just kind of started introducing hula into this Hawaiian, this really kind of formed Hawaiian ensemble. So I think it had been there for a while, but they invited Kalena Silva, who was at that time.
He was Len.
Yeah, he was Len. They invited him to help her. And Leila Alahai. Because they were, at that time, had just leaving, I think, from Antimaiki Ainu. So, I'll share this story with you because this is like my first disappointment in Hula. We're lined up, and Robert is teaching us the song, Eho Ike Alohi Iha. Eho Ike Alohi Iha. And as you know, we're all lined up, and he's showing us the motions, and one by one he tells us, sit down. Sit down. Beautiful. And when he finally came to me and gave me that finger, I was like, no! I wanted to death. So, I told me to sit down, okay, that was my rejection. My first rejection. Yeah, so it's like, but all my other classmates, you know, did a long time dances with him, and I love them all. I mean, Charles Padula, Reggie Louis, all of them. And so that's the start of Robert's Hula, and that was also the start of when Allah's Hula. Whether they couldn't, a lot of the students at that time were my classmates from Canada who went into their home. And I think he was teaching on campus for a while. Anyway, so I started dancing with Hula because I really wanted to dance. And so we would, once a week, we'd get together, you know, we'd learn Hula. A lot of it was his own compositions. And so if you do Hula Hall, and you're a very creative person, I mean, where he came up with all these songs and just fun. It was kind of interesting that a lot of his dances at that time were the movement of Hula was still pretty conservative. I can say that in hindsight now. I don't know if I could have said that back then. I wouldn't know any other back then. It wasn't until, so after I graduated, I moved up to Hilo, and I was told that I needed to go see Auntie Edith and after he could join her. So just about that time, Hula was kind of formed just kind of prior to that. So Auntie was teaching a lot, but the Hula was in existence for a while. But a semblance of the Hula, I don't know if it was called Hula Kikuhi prior to that. I think it was something else. I think it was like Hula to the students or something. But Auntie, so I remember it was in one of the portable buildings. In fact, the portable building was still there. That first red building was, is that Cleveland Street? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cleveland Street. She was sitting there in the classroom, and I went in to talk to her, and she said, okay, you come this week. And so I went down, I told my friend Colin, because he had a car. So, anyways, he said, yeah, okay, so he took me, I don't think he really wanted to, but, and that's when we started dancing with Hello, with him. At least she said yes. Only one rejection. But prior talk tonight is that the State Council of Hawaiian Heritage that was run by Hula had developed all these Hula workshops. And so, when you're really interested in something, you could try to go to wherever you find it. And that's basically what it is. Once a year, they have these workshops. And so I had the good fortune of being exposed to some good teachers. But it was just for that day. But still, you get to see how they act, how they react, what they think about, when they with their hula, and how they talk, and just their whole approach to hula. Some of it was different. Everybody has a little different way of approaching, and you can see the subtle differences in the subtle.
Mahalo. So one of what we want to think about is a conflict. Because it may not be hula, but it might be you want to learn something. And perhaps it's cultural or something, and there's people in the community for some reason will get rejected based on what's important at that time. But do you persist? Do you just pull back and give up the first time? So we can have persistence. Like one of the when he says if you really love something, you're going to find a way. Now, Auntie Hula was interesting because she was the way that was given was not the way she was really looking. So it's interesting when we have this thing when you ask the universe, you gotta be really specific because it's gonna form your world. And sometimes we can have intentions, but in our world sometimes there's a greater intention that we have to wake up to, and sometimes we're the last to wake up to that. So that's it. Now. Again, I'm another little kid. He wasn't born in the 70s, huh? 75. So you see, so you had to do all those competitions? Was she your equal bag?
Bono was in my old pool when we did marijuana.
Okay, yeah, that's why you're still at that stage. Okay, but see what was happening again? I was. In the 70s, I came together as a child dancer. It was quite new. So I know that I would say like a generation, 10 years in Hula world. They were like a couple generations ahead of me. But there was this really great sensation that was happening. One was that Hula was not just for tourists and Waikiki. So oftentimes when we saw Hula, it was maybe family parties or on the big stage. But it was always all those nice Hawaiian, Asian-looking Hula dancers with long hair and all feet. They get the tourists, what was important to that industry, which was not a bad thing, but it was what it was. But Hula now began entering into neighborhoods and into schools, because I remember we loved many times because there was always somebody like my George Nahote was that man that came up in funny clothes. You never saw anybody. We thought he was a man that was like dressed in tinfoil. It was like, for country people, which was like only really interesting at that time. It was a big thing to have somebody come into your neighborhood. Because sometimes all the great things happening on the other side, you want to so now. So there was this movement that was happening, and Hula was and then there was a time when white they were waking up, the nation was waking up, says, okay, enough of colonization. Let's begin to understand what's happening here. It had to do with water rights. That was a huge trigger. Water rights, the water got kind of value. And so it started to get switched over, and then that's when people started coming together and realized that in our song and in our dances were a lot of the things we needed to stand up as a people. And so Hula began to take it was still entertainment, but now there was another purpose. Can you share with us some of the reasons behind these Hula people beginning to teach annually through this program? What was the reasoning behind it?
Well, when I again, I had the great fortune to be with Wakale, and I was living on Oahu at the time. So she was one of the primary instructors in those hula workshops, as well as what they would call library lectures. We would go and lecture in the lecture demonstrations in the libraries. But she would organize, she was one of the hula that organized those hula workshops on Oahu. And, you know, like you said, the greats of hula came. Now when we look back, it's like, holy kamoli. You know, we were with these greats of hula, and they were really nice people, you know, and we had, as dancers for Wakale, we had the distinct honor and pleasure to learn from people like Keolani Wahine, from Auntie Sally Woods, from Pat Bacon, from all of these people, because they came. They came to these workshops, these gatherings, these various places that they began to take hula into the community. Like Kamuela said, there was a growing desire for people to have hula in a different way. You know, to have the great resurgence of Hawaiian awareness, language, hokulea, kaho'olawe were all happening at the same time, and hula resurgence was all happening at the same time. During the, I was with Auntie Wakale from 69 to 1974. Actually 75, because then she was born and I moved to Maui. But during that time, there were workshops up at Kamehameha schools. We had the big concerts down at McKinley Auditorium. The first time I saw Halau Kepuhi was there at McKinley Auditorium in maybe 71 or 72, something like that. It was the first time they came, and Edith and the Halau came from Hilo to do this concert that was put together by the Council for Hawaiian Heritage as well. We were there, and Hilo was there. So it was really being able to be with and to be in the same place as all of these other, now we know, deep knowledge. The hula workshops would travel. Yeah, they have, once a year they travel to the different islands. By that time I was on Maui, so they would come to Maui and have the workshops there as well. One thing I always remember is Uncle George never wanted to teach adults. He only wanted to teach children. When he came to Maui, we tried to give him advanced class. You know, like, he don't want advanced class, he wants the kids. Because he said, advanced class, they don't listen. I want the kids. So, the workshops were down at Liebert Community College, Kamehameha Schools, on our campus at UH Maui College. So, all of these, Auntie Harriet Ney from Molokai, who was a foremost knowledge bearer of her island. So they all came to these conferences. They all wanted to share. They all were very happy to be able to be in these places with people who wanted to come. That's the thing. People wanted to come to these workshops, so they wanted to be there as well.
I think for some of the people who got there, they also, I think they felt a sense of urgency to pass on what they knew. Well, not so much pass on what they knew, but I think they felt a sense of urgency that if their style of hula was going to live, they needed to put certain things in place. I'll give you an example. Auntie Mikey, I knew, over the course of a period of time, she had graduated so many students.
Close to 50.
Close to 50 students. All of them, not all of them are practicing, have active allowed. But that's an enormous legacy to me. So, all these students who get together, all these halal who get together, they may be dancing Mahi Aylana all the same way because they all had the same source. But that was her sense of urgency of trying to ensure that, at least for her Hula, that there was going to be a continuation of it. And wasn't just her. I think that sentiment was shared amongst a lot of the Hula. What's interesting, though, at that time is that most of the Hula, other than just a handful, were females. So you had the Henry Bob, you had the George Mope, you had the George Volkai, you had a few noted male who got there. But what's interesting is that, like I said, like in my family, was what the females did. There was this great research of that. There's this great interest from males to start learning how to dance. And so, prior to that, when we were dancing Hula, there was this unfounded stigma that you're about Hula. But now, if you dance Hula, it's almost, that stigma doesn't necessarily hold true anymore.
Sometimes it's like you're a rock star.
Yeah.
Right? Because that male hula dance up there is like, oh yeah.
But it took at least 1 or 2 generations for that cycle, that thought cycle to be changed. But the growth of the Hula then started up with Darryl Benuli, John P. Kawa, Frank Sebu,
Polani
yeah.
and others.
I don't know if you know this, but this was that Kamehameha Day celebration when these three of them came out. Daddy's Wilson, four.
Right.
Daddy's Wilson, Ryan Marcello, Darryl Benuli, and John Kahimi Kawa. They were all
One
halal came out and they performed. It was like the most, for me, it was the most magical thing. Because here you saw guys dancing, Kanye dancing, like you never seen. And then eventually they parted their ways and all had their own halal. But the growth of the male Hula dance was, I think, one of the biggest phenomena to occur.
And speaking to that, I think there was something in the water in Aiea. Because those guys all came from Aiea.
Yeah.
All of them. So there was something happening in the air up there. They put out this bulge style of Hula.
In the 1980s, maybe late 1980s, when I was at the university, Papa Hawaii was being sought after a couple of terms to teach medicine. And he says, no, medicine is for my family. Medicine has to be within the family. And so we say, no. But I said, I was still a student. I had no clue of this until afterwards. But the fact at that time, one, because of this language, it was hard to find a male speaker that had some cultural foundations that to share the language that was willing to teach. Most of the Manaleo that came to the university were women. For some reason, it was hard to get males. And then in the 1990s, something happened, and we actually contacted Dr. Pila or whatever and said he wants to teach medicine. And so, of course, a number of us jumped into class. Because, you know, he was going to learn medicine, actually. And his mind was so rapid, it was kind of really got exciting, he got more rapid. It was kind of hard to, it wasn't like a calm, you know, Hula kind of talking. It was like, you know. But somebody asked him, one of the students asked him, sometimes it's good to have Mahawali students because they ask a question you want to ask. And the person asking, why are you not deciding to teach it? He said something that was very poignant, and I wonder if that plays similarly. You know, he says, medicine has always been in his family, has always been his family's contribution to the community. And there's certain things that you can pass on that cannot be passed on to anyone. But he woke up realizing one day that there wasn't enough people in his family that was interested. And so he needed to reach out to other people's children. And I saw this play out in Hula. I'm not sure if that was one of the reasons you spoke with urgency, where they needed to now begin to entrust the knowledge beyond their comfort or what they were accustomed to. And so, do you have any other examples, or maybe even of whether you experienced it or you heard about it, where people, and you can share the name if you're comfortable or not, but where people actually had to reach out because it feels they had to keep the hula alive? And why did they have to keep the hula alive? Other than just the style, was there something, another reason behind having to borrow other people's children to go one more generation?
You know, I think when I looked at the masters of that time, I think for many of them, they had already, by the time I came along in the early 70s, they had already started to reach out. And Tisali Woods out in Laie at first was very Laie centered. And then began to, well, not that I think Laie didn't have the people, but I think she saw the interest elsewhere. That she wanted to, you know, Sai comes from her, Sunday comes from her, and they're all Laie people. But I think she also saw that there are people outside of her community that truly were interested. Because some of the times we want to keep it in our family and community because, in case you didn't know, and I know if you Hula people, you know this, Hula are control freaks. Yeah? No. They're control freaks. So I think they began to see that they can control this part of their world still, but there are other places that if they don't stretch out into, that again, it may not reach others and then have a longevity. And I think part of that comes from their desire, just like we are, our desire to honor the teachings of our teachers. Yeah, and to move forward the teachings of our teachers. And so when they brought these things forward, that was part of it. And you know, Tangalo, you also know in your extended Ohana that occurred in Laie as well, that there may not have been enough people that were interested in maintaining traditional dance, that they had to go a little further stretch because the children were not interested and the grandchildren were not interested. Or, and this also happened during that time, family move away. Yeah, family move away. And so where you would rather download on family move away. And so now when you look around, if you want this to live, you have to take others in.
Okay, that's an important piece.
I'm not sure if I have a little different perspective on this, only because we recognize that there are some families that holds deep traditions, right?
What?
We also recognize that there is a ceremony that allows for others to be able to partake of that same thing. So when Antipua Kanahele was here and talking about her pump, she explained about Agnes Kanahele, her mother-in-law, and her pool was Puahaheo. And so when Puahaheo felt the need to open a halal, it wasn't just the family, right?
There were church members.
There were church members. So there was this sense that what he taught, what he wanted to do was not just for the family, was for the community, right? Many years ago, I got to speak to Pt.1, who back in the old days, and when I say old days, 70's and 80's, she had a halal in the kilo. She was like in the old Hata building, so halal kikuli was in the front, and she had her halal in the back. But Pt.1 was one of Auntie Eva's contemporaries, and she shared with me their umiki. And so Auntie Edith was there, and Pt.1's sister, Dr. Stevens, was there, and as well as a whole group of women. And they had their umiki with. Anyway, so I guess my point is that there comes a time. There is a part, there's a process within Hula that allows for that to be extended to the community, so that the role is there in the community. And so it's not just something that some families may choose to just do it for the family, but others will have the right, some people will have the right to be able to develop their community that way.
There is an interesting, so again, I'm going to talk about the region, but regions may be different. So what is the same for one island may not be the same processes, but it did reach upon a shore upon this idea of ritual, how ritual will assist in the sharing. And Cy Bridges was, I looked at one of his interviews and he said, we cannot give everything to colonization. And he said, about Hula, because sometimes that's the rhetoric we take. We don't have this, we have to just colonize. He says, no, there were rituals. And he cites from this very strong Hula family. And this is where the Kahil comes from, and Miley Stan. Two of my students actually descend from this communities too. But he talked about, he said, one of his aunties, the husband died and left her with children. And, and La'i was a country. La'i is still a country, but back then it was like a rebel nation. It was rural. I don't know why I always forget a point actually. La'i was like far. I didn't say La'i. La'i was far. But he said that tourism and Hula was, tourism was buying Hula. And then one of his relatives that knew that she would raise her children on Hula. But she was committed to the Kuahu. And then here's the value. There's always a way. And so they got together and she got her aunties together because it cannot be a one-person decision. It's an intergenerational decision. I think that's why the need for control creeps. Because we have to answer to our actions and the actions of our students. And they said, and Sai shares this thing, and he didn't have to share, but I think it's an important value that we needed to hear. He says that they had a ritual that committed the person when she was a child to the Kuahu. And she could only do Hula within that prescription. But because she needed to